The lanterns are lit, their soft glow flickering against the cool October night. Outside, the wind stirs the last of the autumn leaves, rattling them across the ground like dry bones in the dark. It is Halloween, and though more than a century has passed, tonight we turn our gaze backward. We are not in the world of costumes and candy that you may know. We are in the year 1890, where shadows stretch long, where traditions of the old country still cling tightly, and where the air itself seems filled with mystery. So, settle in, pull your blanket close, let your mind rest in the quiet of this moment. For in the story you are about to hear, we will walk together into a Halloween night unlike any you've ever known. The lamps burn low, the hearth glows, and the voices of the past are ready to speak again. And before we begin this journey, if you enjoy these lantern-lit wanderings into history, I invite you to subscribe to Holiday History. Each week, we bring alive the forgotten tales of holidays long past. Together, we create a space where time softens, where stories breathe again, and where you can close your eyes and drift back into other centuries. Now, let us prepare ourselves for 1890. The year rests at the edge of two worlds. The modern age approaches. Electric lights are beginning to flicker into existence in great cities. Bicycles clatter along cobblestones. Newspapers spread stories faster than ever before. And yet, the old world clings tightly still. Families warm themselves by coal fires, reading tales by lamplight. Horse-drawn wagons crowd the roads. Villages linger in silence beneath the autumn moon, much as they did centuries earlier. It is a time of transition, caught between tradition and change. On Halloween, that in-between feeling is strongest of all. For this night, to the people of 1890, is not merely for play. It is a night weighted with whispers of spirits, with games of fortune, with laughter and unease intertwined. In the parlor, young women will peel apples and toss the skins over their shoulders, hoping the shapes they fall into will spell out the name of a future husband. In the kitchen, nuts will roast in the fire, their popping said to reveal whether love will endure or fade. Outside, boys will roam the streets, their lanterns carved not from pumpkins, but from turnips, pulling gates from hinges and daring each other into tricks that teeter between mischief and menace. But we will not rush. Tonight is not about hurrying from one image to the next. Tonight is about lingering in the glow, letting the world of the past come alive one breath at a time. Each sound, each sight, each taste and smell will carry us deeper into the heart of this Halloween night. The story you are about to hear is not one single tale, but a weaving together of many threads. The laughter of children in narrow lanes, the hushed tones of ghost stories told by firelight, the scent of cider and roasted apples, the scrape of boots against the cobblestone. You will be there among them, as if you had stepped through a door in time. So close your eyes if you wish. Let the noise of the present fade. The year is 1890. The night is All Hallows' Eve. The lamps are trembling in the wind, the hearths are warm, and the veil between worlds feels thinner than ever. Now, let us begin. The year is 1890, and October has nearly run its course. The last traces of twilight have drained from the sky, leaving only a thin silver glow clinging to the horizon. The air is cool and sharp, touched with the faint tang of chimney smoke. As you step outside with a lantern in hand, Its glow blooms in a small circle before you, while the rest of the world recedes into shadow. The night is not silent. It holds its breath, waiting. The cobblestones underfoot glisten from the dampness of the day. Each stone catches the wavering shine of the gas lamps that line the road. These lamps do not burn evenly. They sputter and hiss, producing small halos of golden light that fade quickly into darkness. The result is a patchwork of brightness and obscurity. One moment the path is clear, the next it vanishes into shadow. Even the brick walls of nearby shops and homes seem alive, swelling and shrinking as the flames flicker within the glass globes. From the main street comes the steady clip of hooves. A horse pulls a carriage at an unhurried pace, its driver hunched beneath a heavy coat, collar turned up against the chill. The rhythmic clatter of wheels follows behind, iron rims grinding faintly against stone. A gust of wind lifts the edge of the passenger's curtain, offering a glimpse of a pale face in lamplight before the fabric falls back into place. The noise drifts away, leaving the street once more to its hushed stillness. Along the sidewalks, shutters are being pulled closed. Shopkeepers finish their day's work, locking doors and sweeping thresholds before retreating indoors. The clink of a key, the creak of a wooden sign swinging in the breeze, the bark of a dog in the distance. Every sound is sharp, carried farther in the cool air. The city has not fallen asleep, but it has shifted tone. Where daytime is filled with noise and bustle, the night of October 31st feels charged, as though every ordinary sound is sharpened by the season's expectation. Yet not all voices belong to adults closing up their day. Down a narrow lane, a cluster of boys slips between doorways, quick-footed and full of restless energy. They carry crude lanterns hollowed from turnips, each carved with a jagged face. The candlelight inside shines through the rough cuts, making the grimaces appear grotesque, almost alive. Their laughter rises, then falls as they hush each other. A gate creaks in protest as it is lifted from its hinges. A rope is stretched across a walkway, at knee height, invisible in the gloom. Mischief is at hand, not cruel but daring, meant to test courage and stir commotion. The night belongs to them as much as to the families gathered safely indoors. Step away from the city, though, and Halloween takes on another character. In the countryside, lanterns are fewer, roads unpaved, and houses set wide apart. Here, the darkness reigns supreme. Cornstalks cut low after harvest stand brittle and pale beneath the moon. An owl calls from the rafters of a barn, its wings sounding like cloth torn suddenly through the silence. The cry of a fox carries over open fields, mournful and sharp. With no lamps to soften the shadows, the stars above blaze brighter, constellations glittering coldly over the blackened earth. For rural families, the night is more solemn. Superstitions feel nearer, whispered in kitchens and by hearths. A shutter slamming in the wind, the shuffle of dry leaves against the door, even the squeak of a mouse in the granary, all become signals that perhaps the unseen is drawing close. Some kindle small fires outside, a remnant of older rituals, their light believed to keep restless spirits away. Others hang sprigs of rowan or sprinkle salt near thresholds. The countryside, without the protection of bright lamps or bustling neighbours, feels closer to the world of omens. Yet whether in the gaslit streets of town or the silent lanes of the countryside, the essence of Halloween in 1890 is the same. a threshold between the ordinary and the otherworldly. This is not yet the holiday of sugar and costumes, but neither is it the fire and ashes solemnity of centuries past. It is a night balanced precariously between mischief and reverence. Consider, too, the people themselves. Women hurry home, skirts of wool and cotton sweeping damp stones. Their dresses are long, with bodices buttoned to the throat, sleeves puffed slightly at the shoulder in the latest fashion. Cloaks or shawls guard against the chill. Men stride past in dark coats and bowler hats, collars stiffened, shoes polished, though already wet with evening mist. Children linger behind them, some with masks made of stiff paper or stitched cloth, more disguise than decoration. The anonymity thrills them, for on this one night they may be mistaken for sprites or shadows. Pause at one of the row houses along the street. Its windows glow with warmth, lace curtains pulled back just enough to reveal the amber gleam of lamplight. Within, silhouettes move. A hostess arranging chairs, guests removing coats, children darting past with laughter quick on their lips. The faint strains of a piano drift out when the door opens briefly, carrying with it the smell of roasted apples and nutmeg. That parlour holds its own Halloween spirit. Games, laughter, fortune-telling, and stories whispered by the fire. But we will not enter yet. Not quite. Linger outside a moment longer. Hear the scrape of wagon wheels fading into distance, the hush of boots against wet stone, the leaves rattling like whispers as carried across the ground. In this moment, you stand at a crossing of times. Behind you lies the old world of superstition, bonfires and charms passed down through generations. Ahead is the modern century, promising electric light, organised parties, and eventually the candy-filled celebrations that would define Halloween in the future. Tonight, though, belongs fully to 1890. It is half familiar, half forgotten. It is a night alive with trickery, with expectation, with shadows that seem just a little deeper than usual. Raise your lantern higher. The street ahead grows darker, but in the distance a house glows brightly, a beacon against the autumn chill. Laughter rings faintly from its windows. Inside, fortunes will be told, games will be played, and ghost stories will stir the imagination. That is where we will go next, stepping across the threshold into the heart of a Victorian Halloween gathering. The door opens with a gentle pull, and warmth spills over the threshold. Lamplight curls into the hall like liquid gold, carrying scents of clove, singed candlewick, and something sweet. Baked apples, perhaps, or a sugared cake cooling on a wire rack. A hostess greets you with a low, cordial smile and a soft "Good evening," her voice hushed as if the very air prefers quiet. Your lantern is set on a small table by the door, and you slip into a house where the night's edge has been blunted by glow and music. The entry is narrow and tidy. Wool coats hang from pegs, a few dripping faintly from the earlier mist. A porcelain umbrella stand sits beneath, painted with blue swallows and trailing ivy. Beyond the transom, the parlour opens in a gush of pattern and texture, flocked wallpaper in a deep wine hue, gilded frames catching sparks of light, and a rug with roses woven so thick they appear almost plush enough to pluck. A coal fire hums in the grate, its iron tiles shining. Now and then a cinder pops, and the room breathes. Fire, lamp, faces, shadows, all moving on the same slow tide. Guests are already gathered. Young men in waistcoats polished to a sheen, trousers with a crisp centre crease, watch chains glinting under the lamp. Young women in gowns of wool or silk, high-necked but cleverly trimmed with lace or a ribboned brooch. Sleeves fuller at the shoulder in the latest cut. Cheeks pinked by the cold have warmed to a calm glow. Gloves are tucked into pockets or slid discreetly into reticules. It is not a formal ball, yet the care of presentation is evident in every polished shoe and tidy cuff. On a sideboard near the window stands a still life meant for the evening. Dishes of apples, russets, Baldwins and greenings, each variety mounded in its own bowl. A plate stacked with ginger biscuits. A glass compote filled with walnuts and hazelnuts. A small jug of cream. A pitcher of spiced cider with slices of lemon floating against the glass. The host has tucked sprigs of dried tansy and wheat into the arrangement. Simple autumn markers that make the table feel festive without garish display. No paper cutouts or rubber bats here. Victorian taste tends towards suggestion. The season enters in the fragrance of nutmeg and the rumble of a hearth. In a turnip lantern set discreetly at the mantle's end, with a pinched little face and a wavering smile. At the far wall stands an upright piano. Its keys have just been dusted, and a young gentleman in round spectacles warms his fingers with a brief exercise. When conversation drops, he slips into a waltz popular at assemblies, something light that bends to the scale of the room. A cousin hums along. Another taps a shoe in small, careful time, so as not to scuff the polished floorboards. Music is less a performance than a thread sewn quietly through the evening, holding talk and laughter together. Conversation runs on safe channels, at least to start. A new book from the lending library, the price of coal, rumours that a downtown street will test electrical lighting. Someone mentions bicycles, how quickly the riders fly, and a great-aunt, scandalised, declares that young ladies will ruin their spines with such contraptions. A chorus of polite disagreement rises, all smiles. They sip cider, argue graciously, and pass the biscuits. On the mantelpiece, a clock ticks with agreeable purpose, tick-tock, tick-tock, and beside it lies a folded newspaper. If opened, it would show the usual autumn notices. Harvest yields, church socials, a column scolding rowdy youths for pranks last year. But no one reads. Tonight is for talk, for warmth, for the slow unfolding of ritual. The lamps are trimmed, globes shining like moons. The curtains, lace beneath heavy drapes, are drawn just enough that outside lamplight becomes a blur rather than a glare. In the corner stands a tall screen embroidered with willow branches, and behind it, near enough to catch the heat, a cat has claimed the choicest patch of rug, yawning occasionally, indifferent to the holiday. The hostess claps her hands softly, merely a signal, not a command. "Shall we begin?" she asks, and the parlour brightens in spirit, if not in wattage. A few games to honour the season, and then a story or two. Heads nod. Fans are snapped shut. The piano lid falls with a gentle click. Conversation gathers its skirts and sits politely. A basin is brought out, a wide ceramic bowl with a faint ivy border, and set on a low table draped with a white cloth. Fresh water from the kitchen is poured in, catching the lamplight and shivering. Apples go in after it, red, green and mottled, a little fleet of boats bobbing toward one another. A murmur rises. Not every household approves. Some call it inelegant, but in the spirit of the night, this parlour allows a little splashing. A cousin from across town volunteers first, tucks a napkin into her collar, and kneels with a grin she tries to suppress. The room leans forward with her. She dips, misses, bursts up laughing, breath scattering droplets like beads. On the second try, she pins a Baldwin to the bowl's rim and drags it up, teeth triumphant, curls damp, applause polite but genuine. A friend follows, then another, each return greeted with the small cheers that feel so much bigger indoors. When a young man takes his turn, the cheering shifts from amused to lightly competitive. He submerges decisively, comes up with nothing, shakes his head like a wet retriever, and finally secures a crisp green prize, to grins all around. A towel circulates. The host, practical, sets a second bowl for rinsing hands, and passes more biscuits to blot the taste of the water. Once the basin is carried away, a different amusement appears. Snap-apple. A cord is stretched from the door to a hook by the mantel. From it dangles an apple skewered with a small fork, swinging gently, and behind it, just beyond, hangs a short candle snuffed and newly lit, a pale flame wobbling as the apple sways. The trick is simple to describe and devilish to perform. Take a bite without catching wax. A line forms. The apple jerks. The candle's heat warns noses back. Laughter bubbles each time someone misjudges and retreats with a startled gasp. When at last a gentleman catches a proper mouthful, the room acknowledges his victory with a quick, gleaming pride reserved for games no one truly needs to win. The scent of apple flesh and a faint scorch of tallow mingle pleasantly in the air. Next, the hostess opens a small tin and scatters a handful of nuts onto a brass shovel held at the fire. They hop like lively little beetles under the heat, rattling and spinning. It is not yet the hour for fortunes. Those belong to later, when the room is quieter. But even without predictions, the small spectacle delights. Chatter lowers, eyes fix on the shovel, and tiny pops punctuate the steady clock. When the nuts brown and release their warm, oily perfume, they're poured into a bowl and passed with pinches of salt. Fingertips shine, napkins flutter, a sleeve is discreetly dabbed. The piano resumes for a moment. No showy runs, just a sweet air with room for 10 voices to join. People do, quietly. Humming threads the space between lamp and fire, while the cat blinks and resettles. A gentleman modestly good at parlour magic produces a coin from a cuff and a paper flower from behind a child's ear, to small approving gasps. Nothing frightful. The mood leans toward gentle marvel, as if the house itself prefers wonders that reassure rather than alarm. And yet, it is Halloween. In a lull, the host crosses to the mantel and lowers the turnip lantern to the table. Up close, its face is homely, eyes wedged with a pocket knife, teeth uneven, and the candle inside has burned the walls translucent. He doesn't announce anything. He simply sets it near the cider pitcher, and the room absorbs the reminder. Tricks roam outside tonight. Charms, perhaps, will find this room later. For now, they keep to the softer end of mischief. A spool of thread for a blindfold, a saucer with a ring tucked beneath a folded napkin, a handful of keys placed soundlessly on a plate, little set-ups for later play. And with that, the parlour becomes a stage for quieter magic, its light turned inward, its company prepared. The games of laughter have passed. The hour for Fortune's whispers has arrived. the parlour has gentled into a hush, the kind that arrives when a gathering finally agrees, without speaking, to listen for something delicate. Hands fold. Glasses are settled on saucers. What remains of the cider sends up faint curls of steam that drift toward the ceiling rose and vanish. Someone nudges the coal with the poker. A glow deepens, throwing thin braids of light along the fender. It is time. Time for the night's quieter games. The ones that pretend to look forward and yet tell you mostly what you already wish to hear. The host places a single tallow candle at the centre of the table and shields the flame with his palm until it steadies. Beside it, he sets a small oval mirror, the sort of glass a lady might keep in a dressing-table drawer. Its silvered surface catches the room in miniature. Lamps softened, curtains dim, faces attentive and slightly amused. The hostess lays out a small plate, a paring knife, and a handful of firm apples, their skins mottled red and olive. A rustle of anticipation moves through the circle. Even those who do not believe want to watch. First, the hostess says, the peel. She turns to a shy girl in dove grey, the cousin who earlier fished a Baldwin from the basin with a triumphant bite. The girl's gloved hands are now bare, and she holds them near the candle as if to warm a little courage. Steady hand, the hostess advises gently. All the way round, without breaking. The knife meets the apple with a tidy whisper. Peel curls away in a ribbon thin as ribbon can be, coiling down past the girl's wrist. She does not rush. Her friends perch forward, one with fingertips pressed to her lips, another pretending not to care and failing. Around and around the knife goes until the apple stands pale and neat, the strip of skin dangling like a crimson serpent. Now, the hostess says, over the left shoulder. The girl turns, lifts the peel, and tosses it behind her. It falls with a delicate slap and a crooked twist. There is a small scramble as three young people lean over it from different angles, each seeing a different letter. That's an S, one declares. Ah, says another. The host, playing judge, tilts his head. A brave G, he pronounces at last, and a ripple of laughter loosens the room. Somewhere, a young man with the right initial builds, undeservedly, a modest legend. Another volunteer steps forward, then another. A peel lands like a figure eight, and is interpreted after a spirited debate as B. Another falls in an honest C, tidy as handwriting. There are groans, blushes, and a discreet glance toward the piano bench, where a particular gentleman is studiously examining the keys. When one patient soul produces a peal that breaks halfway and crashes to the carpet in two unromantic lumps, the room applauds anyway. Two suitors, someone teases, and good humour prevails. Next comes the nut test. The host places two hazelnuts side by side on the hearthstone. Name them, he says. A girl whispers Eleanor to one, Thomas to the other, then steps back as if preparing for a small verdict. A poker is held close. The nuts warm and twitch, then jump. Together, someone hopes, but Eleanor somersaults tidily. Thomas shivers in place, then cracks with a faint, decisive pop. The reaction is theatrical despair and actual relief, expertly mixed. The heart is a contrary organ, the host says with mock solemnity. Try again with better candidates. Laughter follows, but even those who laugh glance downward, privately consulting their own names against remembered glances exchanged across the room. The hostess doesn't let the pace rush ahead. The parlour requires rhythm, a lift of laughter, a pool of quiet, a new curiosity unfolded. She brings forward a modest cake, a dense loaf dotted with currants, and shows with a conspirator's smile that charms have been hidden inside. A ring, a button, a bean, a tiny wishbone wrapped in paper. "Slices for fate," she says, and begins to cut. The first piece goes to the child near the screen, who finds only cake and looks greatly relieved. The second slice produces the button. "Industry," says the host, and its recipient promises to finish a certain embroidery sampler before snow. A gentleman receives the bean and holds it aloft like a sceptre. "King for an hour," someone cries, and for the next 60 minutes he will be obliged to rule in matters of toasting and choosing the next amusement. The ring stays hidden for now, and its absence becomes its own expectation. Through all of this, the mirror waits, canted slightly, so it reflects the candle in a narrow corridor of light. No one mentions it, and that silence gives it strength. When the cake plates are cleared and the saucers reset for tea, the hostess finally turns to it. "Some of you," she says, "will have heard that the face you are meant to know can be seen in glass, if you are brave and solitary enough." A wave of delighted nerves moves through the company. There are rules. You must be alone. You must hold the candle just so, and, she adds with an indulgent smile toward the aunt, you must approach without giggling. She selects a pair of cousins to serve as marshals. They lead volunteers into the small back hallway, where a tall mirror hangs opposite a sideboard laden with winter coats. The corridor is cool, and the old wood breathes. Each volunteer takes the candle, dims it with a cupped hand, and stands before the glass. Most return with a shrug. Only myself and a smudge. One arrives with eyes shining in faint alarm. "I saw a second light," she whispers. The marshals grin. One confesses to holding his own candle where it might reflect. Even so, the volunteer is buoyant for the remainder of the evening, as if some veil has thinned just for her. When the mirror scrying has spent its thrill, a quieter custom emerges. The hostess produces a small bowl half filled with water. Into it she drops the white of an egg, punctured with a needle so it pours like silk. As the heat of the parlour touches the water, filaments uncurl and feather outward, drifting into shapes that invite meaning. "A ship," someone says at once. "A journey." Another sees a church steeple. "Marriage." A triumphant verdict that earns good-natured groans. A gentleman claims to spot a plough, and consents to be told he will work harder than anyone in the room by next harvest. Even the sceptical aunt admits that one spire-like tendril looks just enough like a top hat to count as a stranger's silhouette. The bowl keeps its mysteries. The company supplies the rest. One last charm is proposed, light-hearted, suitable for those who dread the mirror's honesty. The host places 3 bowls on the table, one filled with clear water, one clouded with a drop of ink to stand for the sea, and one empty. Blindfolded guests are spun and guided to dip a finger into a bowl. Fresh water predicts marriage close to home. Ink a match from afar. The empty bowl a season more of solitary freedom. A practical girl, upon finding the empty vessel, cheers more loudly than anyone else. She has a travelling aunt and plans to claim the spare room for herself all winter. Another lands in the inky water and laughs at the blot at her fingertip. "I shall marry a sailor or a newspaperman," she says, "and I cannot decide which is more likely to drown me." The aunt assures her it will be neither. You'll wed a baker, she says, and live forever on the thick ends of loaves. When the last blindfold comes off and the bowls are cleared, the company seems to share a single breath. The house has not given up any true futures. It has granted what it can. Permission to hope, sanction to tease, a little staging for declarations no one is quite ready to make. Candles have shortened. The coal has settled into a long, steady red. Somewhere deep in the building, a pipe ticks as it cools. The hostess, who has steered the evening like a careful helmsman in a fog, lets the silence sit. Then she gives the smallest nod to the gentleman at the piano. He does not open the lid. Not yet. Instead, he folds his hands and waits. Tonight, music will come later, after the story. Because after the games of prophecy comes the business of spirits. Not the wild seance table kind first, but the domestic sort that travel politely through parlours when invited by narrative. The company draws their chairs closer. The aunt settles with the air of a woman ready to be impressed against her better judgment. The Bean King gives up his rule with a flourish and sinks into a chair, no less proud for having reigned only long enough to oversee a handful of omens and a toast. "Shall we?" the host says. "Here's something suitable to the date." No one answers aloud. They do not need to. Their bodies answer for them. Spines aligned toward the hearth. Faces turned slightly to catch the storyteller's voice. Hands folded not in piety, but in patience. The charms have finished their work. They have softened the room, opened small doors inside ordinary hearts, and made space for a tale to enter. The parlour's warmth still lingers in your mind. The glow of the lamps, the laughter, the smell of nutmeg and coal smoke. But outside, beyond the drawn curtains and the polite hush of fortune-telling games, another Halloween is underway. Step once more into the October air, and you find yourself in a world far less controlled. A world alive with restlessness. The streets in 1890 are not empty. Boys, sometimes joined by girls bold enough to slip past their mother's eyes, range in small packs. They are armed not with candy bags, but with rope, soap, and endless invention. Their lanterns carved from turnips or the occasional pumpkin, bob like will-o'-the-wisps, jagged faces grinning in the dark. Their voices carry in bursts, sharp laughter, muffled shouts, the clatter of boots as they dash from one stunt to the next. The pranks of this night have their own catalogue, well known to townsfolk. Gates are lifted from their hinges and dragged down the road, left leaning against barns or stacked in awkward piles. Wagon wheels vanish and reappear at the far edge of town. Outhouses, if not too firmly secured, are tipped onto their sides to the groans of weary farmers in the morning. Windows are soaped, messages scratched in crude patterns across the glass. In some places, fences are dismantled post by post, an act of endurance disguised as mischief. Chickens are released from coops and scatter across yards, clucking indignantly. The mischief is not always light-hearted. On occasion stones are thrown, or paint is smeared on doors, or livestock startled into running. Adults tolerate much, but not all. By the 1890s, newspapers across America and Britain were already publishing stern warnings. Columns scolded reckless youths for damaging property, for endangering lives. One editorial from the period thundered that Halloween is not an excuse for rowdyism, while another conceded more gently that some allowance may be made for youthful spirits, provided the damage does not extend beyond good humour. But the line between good humour and rowdyism was never easy to draw. Imagine yourself turning a corner and stumbling into such a gang. They scatter at first, startled, but return to jeer and circle, tugging at your coat. A boy flourishes a stolen gatepost like a pike. Another brandishes a tin horn and lets loose a blast that echoes through the narrow street. They are not villains. They are testing boundaries, prodding at the limits of what the night allows. Halloween gives them license, a free pass to act outside the ordinary rules, and they take it gleefully. The danger, adults often complained, was not malice, but escalation. One prank inspires another, and soon wagons are overturned, doors battered, fences torn down entirely. In rural areas, farmers discovered their livestock painted in garish colours, or their wells capped with heavy stones impossible to move without help. A horse might be found tethered on a neighbour's porch, bewildered but docile. One story from an Illinois paper in 1891 described a cow coaxed up the stairs of a schoolhouse, where it refused to descend until morning. Such feats required not just mischief, but planning, strength, and a reckless sort of pride. Yet the towns themselves colluded. Adults grumbled, yes, but many laughed when recounting the stunts in daylight. Fathers shook heads with half-hidden smiles. Mothers scolded, but their voices carried the tone of ritual complaint rather than fury. Communities accepted that Halloween belonged, at least in part, to the young and the unruly. The damage was swept away, gates rehung, wagons righted, fences mended. The stories lingered, embroidered in retelling, and became part of local lore. Step deeper into the town, and you will hear the tricks unfolding in layers. At one house, a group of children ties a string to a knocker, retreating into shadows to rattle it furiously until the bewildered homeowner flings open the door to empty air. At another, flour is sprinkled across a porch so that footsteps mark the arrival of ghosts. A more ambitious gang stretches wire across the street at shin height, and you hear the sudden cry of a pedestrian stumbling, followed by a chorus of shrill laughter. Mischief multiplies as the night lengthens, each prank bolder than the last. But even in this chaos, traditions cling. In Irish and Scottish communities, the mischief carries echoes of ancient customs. Processions meant to frighten away spirits, disguises to confuse wandering souls. The masks, crude as they are, have roots older than the streets they now prowl. For these children, even without knowing the lineage, there is a thrill in becoming anonymous, in stepping outside of themselves for one night. The prank is half play, half ritual, a way of inhabiting a tradition that feels both new and old. Yet not all pranks leave only laughter. There are darker moments. In cities where numbers swell and anonymity emboldens, broken windows, stolen goods, and even fires occasionally scar the night. Police patrols are increased, stern notices are posted. In New York, Boston, and Philadelphia, newspapers describe gangs of youths roaming in the hundreds, pelting passers-by with flour or ash, cutting gaslights, overturning streetcars. These incidents spark debate. Is Halloween a harmless inheritance or a dangerous license? The question lingers in editorials, sermons, and dinner tables alike. Still, for every story of vandalism, there are dozens of smaller pranks, mischievous but survivable. barrels rolled noisily down streets, wooden carts hoisted onto rooftops, benches mysteriously relocated into churchyards. Each feat greeted in daylight with exasperation, but also with a sense that such things belong to Halloween and no other night. As you wander through these restless streets, lantern in hand, you sense the contrast with the parlour left behind. Indoors, the rituals are controlled, fortunes teased out in measured games, laughter tempered by candlelight. Outdoors, the holiday erupts raw and untamed. Both halves are Halloween in 1890, one turning inward, the other outward, each feeding off the season's unsettled spirit. The parlour, after the laughter of charms and the riot of the street outside, has quieted into something altogether different. Lamps burn lower now, trimmed so the flame glows like small suns in cloudy glass. Shadows lengthen along the wallpaper's floral patterns, petals growing into strange shapes. The coal in the grate has melted into a bed of red, pulsing like a heartbeat. You can hear the faint tick of the mantel clock, steady and patient, waiting for the next turn in the evening. Guests shift in their chairs. Fans are folded, cups drained, plates pushed aside. Conversation dwindles into murmurs, then into silence. The hostess lets the stillness deepen before she speaks, knowing that in such quiet, even the smallest word will strike like a note on the piano. "Now," she says, "what is Halloween without a story or two?" The room exhales, a mixture of relief and expectation. This is what everyone has been waiting for. Not just the games, not just the teasing fortunes, but the tales that creep into corners and make the night feel different from any other. The host begins with Washington Irving. From the bookshelf, he produces a well-thumbed copy of The Sketchbook, its spine softened with use. He does not need to read The Legend of Sleepy Hollow in full. Most in the room know the story already. Of Ichabod Crane, of the galloping horseman whose head was a pumpkin carried under his arm. Instead, he recounts the famous chase in his own words, drawing out the moment where hooves thunder across the bridge and the phantom rises in triumph. The room leans in, not because they expect surprise, but because the familiar tale carries its own spell, its own authority. When he finishes, another voice picks up, a cousin with a taste for magazines. He recalls a tale clipped from a serial called Harper's Weekly, of a phantom ship that appeared in the mist off the coast of Maine, its sails ragged, its crew silent as statues. According to the piece, fishermen swore that the sight foretold storms, and indeed, a gale had struck the following week. The cousin tells it with relish, emphasizing the eerie calm of the ship as it passed, leaving no wake, vanishing into fog. A shiver moves through the company, though no one admits to it. The aunt, ever sceptical, declares that ghost stories are best enjoyed with evidence. She recounts one from her own youth, of a light scene moving steadily across a moor. Neighbours insisted it was a lantern borne by a traveller who had drowned years earlier, seeking still to find his way home. The aunt confesses she never saw it herself, but her voice falters just enough to let her audience wonder. Was she protecting her dignity, or had the story touched her more deeply than she wished to admit? The hostess, seeing the mood take hold, dims another lamp. The room shrinks inward. Only the glow of the coals, the faces half lit by their shifting warmth, and the small circle of lamplight on the table remain. Outside, the occasional whoop of boys in the street fades, leaving the house suspended in its own private universe. Now, the stories turn darker. A gentleman recalls the tale of a woman who claimed to hear her name, whispered by an unseen voice each year on All Hallows' Eve. Once, she ignored it, and soon after her fiancé drowned at sea. Another tells of a deserted farmhouse said to be haunted by a farmer's widow, her lantern appearing each October near the abandoned well. A girl with a mischievous smile insists she once heard a knock on her window at midnight, though the sill was too high for any earthly visitor. She swears the pane frosted over in the shape of a hand, 5 fingers spread wide. The room listens, half willing itself to believe, half clinging to skepticism as armour. This is the balance that ghost stories always strike. Fear brushed lightly enough to be safe, but heavy enough to stir the imagination. The tick of the mantel clock grows louder, the scrape of a chair leg sharper. Every sound is magnified, as if the house itself leans closer to listen. And yet, for Victorians in 1890, ghost stories were not just diversions. They were part of a broader fascination, spiritualism. Seances, mediums, table rapping, communications with the beyond. These were fashionable amusements and serious beliefs alike. Families sat around tables waiting for knocks, letters, faint voices. Respectable journals reported on them. Skeptics mocked them. Yet parlours across America and Britain were filled with people willing to suspend disbelief. The host, sensing the appetite of his guests, decides to indulge this interest. He draws the curtains fully shut, sealing the parlour from the street. The lamps are dimmed again, until only the fire and a single candle remain. A round table is cleared, chairs drawn close. The air feels denser, heavier, as though expectation itself has weight. "Only for curiosity," he says, smiling faintly. "Let us see what the night will grant us." Hands are placed lightly on the table. The wood is cool, its grains smooth under fingertips. At first, nothing happens. Silence thickens. The child has been carried to bed, but the cat remains, tail flicking, eyes bright in the shadows. Then a faint creak, the table shifting under weight that no one admits to giving. Someone gasps softly. The aunt narrows her eyes. Another creak, and then a small knock. 1, 2, 3. Laughter bursts, nervous and hushed. "Ask a question," the host suggests. A cousin leans forward. "Who visits us tonight?" Silence, then another knock, faint but distinct. Was it a shift of the wood, the contraction of timber in the fire's heat, or something else? The company leans in closer, breaths shallow. A second question. "Are you friend or foe?" A pause long enough to set nerves on edge. Then 2 knocks, quick, close together. "Friend," someone interprets, and the company exhales, half relieved, half disappointed. Of course, the sceptical aunt insists it is only mischief, a finger pressing where it ought not. Yet even she cannot entirely dispel the atmosphere. The parlour is transformed by the silence, by the flicker of light, by the way every guest holds themselves on the threshold between belief and doubt. The séance does not last long, perhaps 10 minutes, perhaps 15. The host, sensing the limits of credulity, lifts his hands and declares the experiment complete. Relief breaks through the room like sunlight. Shoulders drop, voices rise, the spell releases. Cups are refilled, biscuits passed. Someone hums a fragment of a song. The lamps are brightened again. The parlour breathes, returning to its ordinary warmth. The parlour has shifted once more. The stories have quieted, the seance has passed, and now the company seeks comfort in something more tangible: food. For no Halloween evening in 1890 would be complete without its table of seasonal fare, humble yet rich with meaning. Step closer to the sideboard. The candles are low, but their glow softens the array into something painterly. Apples polished until they gleam, bowls of walnuts and hazelnuts still in their shells, a plate of ginger biscuits stacked like coins, a loaf of currant cake waiting to be sliced. There is nothing gaudy here, no factory-made confections wrapped in foil, no parade of sugar in bright paper. Instead, the food feels rooted in the land, in the season, in the patience of home kitchens. Apples, the heart of the feast. First, the apples, russets with their rough golden skin, Baldwins striped with red and green, pippins tart and crisp. They sit in bowls like jewels, the simplest and most essential of all Halloween offerings. To the people of 1890, apples are not only a treat, but a symbol. They are the fruit of autumn, the last sweetness plucked before frost hardens the orchards. They are the currency of games, bobbing, peeling, divining initials in curling skins. They are sliced into pies, stewed into sauces, dried in rings strung above kitchen stoves. Take a bite, and you taste more than fruit. You taste orchards alive with ladders and baskets, barrels loaded into carts, families filling cellars with bushels to last the winter. The crunch is sharper in the cool air, the juice colder, tinged with memory of summer sun. Every apple carries both sustenance and superstition, and on Halloween night they are prized above all else. Nuts and the fire. Beside the apples, bowls of walnuts and hazelnuts wait, their shells dull in the low light. Guests crack them with small hammers or press them against the iron grate, their interiors warm, oily, faintly sweet. Nuts are more than food, they are omens. When tossed into the fire, their crackling tells of love's fate, steady flames for devotion, sharp pops for discord. Laughter follows each verdict, but beneath it lies genuine curiosity. For in 1890, when choices in marriage still carried weight, any sign, however playful, felt worth noting. The shells litter the table, brown fragments shining faintly, as if the fortunes themselves had been cracked open and left behind. Children nibble the meat between games, fingers glossy with oil. Adults chew more slowly, savouring the earthy taste, the crunch that anchors them to the season. Bread and cake, hidden charms. Now look to the loaf. In Irish and Scottish homes, barmbrack reigns supreme, a yeasted fruit bread heavy with raisins and spices. Inside, charms hide like treasures, a coin for wealth, a ring for marriage, a thimble for spinsterhood, a button for labour. In 1890 America, the tradition survives in modified form. The loaf on this parlour's table contains smaller tokens: a dried bean, a ring wrapped in paper, a key. Each slice is cut with ceremony, each bite taken with anticipation. To discover a charm is to carry its prophecy into the coming year. The texture is dense, chewy, flavoured with nutmeg and cloves. The raisins burst sweet against the tongue. The crust crackles faintly as the knife presses through. Guests compare their slices, laugh when someone finds only plain bread, and erupt in cheers when another strikes a charm. The moment is playful, Yet it hums with an older energy, the sense that fate hides in ordinary things, waiting to be revealed by chance. Molasses and spice. On a smaller plate, molasses cookies wait, their surface is dark and glossy, sprinkled lightly with sugar. Their flavour is deep and robust, sweet, but edged with bitterness, rich with ginger, cinnamon, and clove. In many households, these are the treats given to children who dare knock on doors, though the practice is not yet widespread. A knock may yield a cookie, an apple, or perhaps nothing at all. Trick-or-treating as you know it is decades away. But here are its seeds, baked into circles of spiced dough. For working-class families, molasses is cheaper than refined sugar, and its use ties these cookies to the kitchens of mill towns and farming villages alike. They are sturdy, satisfying, lasting longer than delicate cakes. Their aroma fills the parlour now, mingling with coal smoke and cider steam, a perfume of October itself. The town, so alive only an hour ago with laughter, rattling wagons, and the clang of mischief, has begun to soften into stillness. The October air grows colder, sharper, tinged with frost. Lanterns sputter on porches, their carved faces drooping as wax burns low. The streets, once filled with gangs of boys chasing pranks, are nearly empty now. Boots have carried them home, where scolding parents or indulgent siblings wait to hear the tales of the night. A stray gate still leans awkwardly against a fence. A barrow sits abandoned by the churchyard. Tomorrow, in daylight, these scars will be repaired with weary amusement. Within the parlour, the hush has deepened. Only a handful of guests remain, reluctant to leave the cocoon of warmth and story. Shawls are drawn tight, gloved hands clasped in parting. The hostess offers one last biscuit, one final sip of cider, though the tray is nearly bare. Candles burn to stubs, their pools of wax hardened on brass holders. The fire gives its last sighs, coal collapsed into fine ash. A log is not added, the night is nearly done. At the piano, the lid is closed with care. The songs have ended, their echoes rest in the wallpaper and the rug. The cat curls in sleep, ears flicking occasionally as if still catching phantom sounds. The child, long ago carried upstairs, stirs in a dream, perhaps reliving the sight of the apple peels spinning, or the shimmer of a mirror in candlelight. In the hall, coats swing lightly as they are lifted from pegs. Farewells are spoken in low voices, each guest stepping into the dark with a small lantern or the glow of a borrowed taper. When the last visitor departs, the house exhales into silence. The hostess extinguishes lamps one by one, rooms shrinking into shadow. The mirror is covered with a cloth, its surface no longer needed for glimpses of the unknown. The saucers are stacked, the cake crumbs brushed aside. A faint smell of nutmeg, apple and tallow lingers, seeping into the curtains. It will be gone by morning, replaced by the ordinary scent of coal smoke and soap. Outside, the bells mark the hour past midnight. A church tower tolls, slow and low, as if to remind the town that the season of saints has begun. All Hallows has passed into All Saints, and tomorrow into All Souls. The veil, so thin tonight, begins to close again. What was glimpsed, whether in story, in superstition, or in imagination, recedes back into memory. The streets empty. Frost gathers along fence rails, tracing silver over wood. Leaves, brittle and dry, skitter across cobblestones. The air feels cleaner, quieter, as if the world itself has paused to catch its breath. What was rowdy a few hours ago is now solemn. Halloween in 1890 has run its course, and yet its spirit lingers. The laughter of games, the thrill of ghost stories, the warmth of food and drink, the mischief of the streets, all remain in the mind. For those who lived it, tonight will join the chain of memories passed down in talk and tradition. Years later, someone will recall the peal that fell like an S, the candle that wavered during the seance, the sound of boys toppling a wagon outside. Each detail will grow into story, each story into folklore. This is the heart of Halloween, the weaving of fleeting moments into memory, memory into ritual, ritual into history. A single night in 1890, lived in a parlor and a street, becomes part of the larger tale of how people mark the turning of the year, how they confront fear and mischief with laughter and light. Now the lanterns are dark, the parlor is still, the town sleeps beneath the frost, its mischief spent, its charms completed. The night is over, Halloween has closed its eyes. And so, dear listener, close yours too. The story of this Halloween night has ended. The coals are cold, the candles out, the voices hushed. Outside the stars keep their watch, silent and distant. Tomorrow will bring another day, another season. But for now, rest, for the night belongs to dreams. Ire, their popping said, to reveal whether love will endure or fade. Outside, boys will roam the streets, their lanterns carved not from pumpkins, but from turnips, pulling gates from hinges and daring each other into tricks that teeter between mischief and menace. But we will not rush. Tonight is not about hurrying from one image to the next. Tonight is about lingering in the glow, letting the world of the past come alive one breath at a time. Each sound, each sight, each taste and smell will carry us deeper into the heart of this Halloween night. The story you are about to hear is not one single tale, but a weaving together of many threads. The laughter of children in narrow lanes, the hushed tones of ghost stories told by firelight, the scent of cider and roasted apples, the scrape of boots against the cobblestone. You will be there among them, as if you had stepped through a door in time. So close your eyes if you wish. Let the noise of the present fade. The year is 1890. The night is All Hallows' Eve. The lamps are trembling in the wind. The hearths are warm, and the veil between worlds feels thinner than ever. Now, let us begin.